Welcome to my podcast, Shaping Your Journey. My name is Aldo Matza, percussionist, drummer, and artistic director of Kosa Music, inviting you to join in conversation with friends, artists, professionals, and experts in our music world. Today, I have the incredible opportunity of inviting and having as a guest one of the people that I've collaborated with. And he's one person who's been important to all of us because at some point we've watched those videos, educational videos. We've been part of his world. So, Rob Wallis, thanks so much for joining me, man.
Thanks, Aldo. It's good to see you. We haven't seen each other in a long time, given the
Yes.
state of the world these days.
Yes, and thank God for technology. Now we can see each other like this until we have that opportunity of seeing each other in person. But tell me, before we talk about the topic of shaping your journey, and you've certainly had an incredible one and full of activities and things that you created. Let's start at the beginning. What started it for you? What was that first spark? What was that fire that did it for you?
I mean, it really started with my love of playing the drums, which I'm not sure where that came from. I didn't come out of a musical family. My parents listened to records, and some of the couple of earliest records I remember listening to Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass.
Wow.
The whipped cream record with the beautiful woman on the front cover, covered with whipped cream. And there was a song called The Lonely Bull, which I
Yes.
learned was Earl Palmer, and off the Herb Alpert record. And I don't know why, it just really grabbed me to to want to play drums. So I was 10, maybe 10 years old, and just started playing drums. And I was infected with the disease.
That was happy music. I remember actually seeing them live when I was a kid,
Wow, I never
and
saw them.
I mean, they were just it was just happiness, on stage. He was great marimba player, great playing. Everybody, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it was I guess a big record at the time. I didn't know what even led me to it, and kind of the next record that's very strong in my mind was I got the Jimi Hendrix Are You Experienced record. Blew my mind. I had this tiny little record player with a speaker like that, and I just sat in my room and I put my ear next and I just played it like the day I got it all day long. And again, I know this is talking about the journey. I don't know where it came from. It was there, and I never thought, well, I'll be a musician. I'll go into the music business. I'll play drums, which I'm still doing today. Probably more now than I have in the last many years, which is great. I'm sort of back to my roots, and which feels good. But the whole thing with you know, I went to college, and I went to college in Florida. I grew up in New York, and about an hour north of Manhattan. And when I got out of college, I was like, what do I do? I played a lot of music in college. I was in a big band in the area. But I came back to New York, moved home, and it was like, what do I do now? Didn't know musicians because I had been away for 4 years. I wasn't as serious when I was in high school, although I played a lot in high school. Now I was older, and it was like, okay, you got to start making some decisions. How do you make a living? What am I doing? Am I going to go work at a grocery store? And I figured, let me go work at a local music store and try to meet musicians, because I had no one I could call at that point. When I moved back home, it was like, okay, my phone book was empty. It was a blank page. So
Right.
I started to work. I went and I got a job working at Sam Ash Music in a nearby town. It was like a 15-minute ride, Sam Ash in White Plains, New York. And I started meeting some guys, and I started doing a little playing, locally. And I got friendly with the Ash family, who've lost two real Jerry Ash this year, and Sammy, which was a tremendous loss. On both great gentlemen, and their mom Bernice died a few years back. But I got very close with them. And then one day Jerry asked if I would go work in the Manhattan store in the drum department. They needed some bolstering. I was a good salesman, as you can tell. I have a good talk.
Yes, yes. And
So
so, and that's important too. It's important.
yeah, I love talking to people, especially musicians, and so I ended up going down to 48th Street. Suddenly, I was commuting into the
Yes.
city every day from Westchester, and I had heard about this place called Drummers Collective, and I didn't know what it was. It was kind of like, what is it? A school? Is it like a practice place? It was kind of like this underground thing that was happening, and it had been around for about a year maybe, and it was close by to 48th Street, to the Ash store. It was a couple blocks away. So one day during lunch hour, I walked over and I met Paul Siegel at the front desk. He was working there, as his day job, and he was also studying there at night. And we became friends. One day we went out to get a sandwich, and he said, "Don't tell anybody, but Rick Kravitz, the founder of the original collective, he was a Broadway percussionist mainly. He wanted to leave New York to go join his family's business. They had a very big restaurant apparently in Boston, and so with knowing Paul for about 20 minutes, we said, you know what, maybe we can
Wow.
put some quarters together and work out some kind of deal to take it over from Rick, which is what happened. We basically just bought the instruments and paid him off over time. Neither of us had any money. We each borrowed a little bit of a few dollars for a down payment from our families. And all of a sudden, one day, I was 25 years old and owned a business in New York. And
Beautiful,
that's
beautiful.
that's really where everything that I did, that was the hub, kind of
What
forever.
what year what year was that, Rob?
That was 1980.
1980.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I was a young man.
The reason No, no, the reason I'm asking is because I used to go to New York every month during my university years to study with different people.
Mm,
Anything I couldn't get in Montreal at the time at McGill, because I was a rock drummer and then I was studying classical percussion. So I was in a program where it's a completely classical. There was no jazz or any other studies going on, or Cuban or any. I mean, Cuban was far cry for anybody. So I would
right.
go to New York and study with anybody I could individually, and then I ran into Drummers Collective. So I actually studied at Drummers Collective
Wow.
myself.
I
I
don't
mean,
know if I remember that.
Frankie Malabé,
Yeah,
uh,
Frankie.
Gene Golden. I mean,
Right.
and I mean
Wow.
a lot of guys that I just was like taking in from everybody, and I was going down every month and then meeting all kinds of people, and friends would introduce me to friends through the collective, and also at the shops. I would go to Sam Ash, I would go to Manny's, which was down the street, right?
Right.
So I got to know a lot of people there. People thought I lived in New York. I was there so often, right?
Mm,
and Steve Gadd, at one point I met him, and he used to take me around to the studios. So I used to be a fly in the wall in the control room.
wow. I didn't know this.
Yes, he used to have a Honda Civic, and we used to go from he's. I registered because I wanted to be a studio musician in New York. That was my plan. Of course, that didn't work out, but I had ready a registry, and the musicians would call me through the registry and
Right.
say, "I'm at this studio." Alan Schwartzberg would say, "Okay, I'm doing this record with this singer. Come over there, meet me at this studio." And then I'd meet up with Steve, or Lou Marini was a great friend,
Mm.
and he did the same, and it was just that kind of environment. So I mean, what you did in New York with the collective was amazing. It was a great place to land.
It was something I don't know that it could ever happen again. It was a real environment of sharing, and it was
Yes.
because of the people. Frankie was Kenwood Denard was
Yes,
early
I studied
on,
with Kenwood as well. Yeah.
Mike Lauren. Like there was such a community of positive spirit and sharing, never competition. I can't ever say that I saw that either at the collective or really since. I mean, I always talk about when people that are that I meet that are not in the music world and they say, "Oh, what do you do?" I said, "Well, I'm part of the best social club and fraternity in the world." And they say, "Oh, what's that?" Like thinking I'm going to say, "Oh, like AE
Yes.
some like college frat." It's like the drum world. Like I call
Yes.
like the PAS show and the NAM shows, like all that was like I call them the hug fest. Everybody's hugging each other.
Yes. Yeah. No,
And
you're right. My wife says you guys are weird. All you do is hug. I said, well, when we
right.
don't hug, we play.
It's a lot of hugging and a lot of playing, but
Yeah.
it really it's amazing. I just posted something today. Today's Earl Palmer's birthday, and I like to try to recognize certain people in my social media page on Facebook. So I posted something about Earl, and it just made me think about the NAM shows and going out to dinner with. We would try to orchestrate a dinner once a year with Earl, Hal Blaine, Jim
Wow.
Keltner. They were amazing, and I kill myself for not putting a little recorder on. To these conversations and these dinners were mind-boggling with these guys talking about music and what they're working on, and
Yes.
Jim Keltner talking
Oh,
about his bedroom at George Harrison's house, and like unbelievable stories, mind-blowing history.
yep. Yeah. And they're
And I wish I had just been smart enough to say to everybody here, we're going to record this dinner, because they'd go on for hours and they were historic and hysteric. It's
there, of course.
historical and hysterical.
Yes, yeah, no, no, and Jim Keltner. I mean, I had been trying to get Jim Keltner to come to the not Cuba, but Cosa workshops that we did in
Yeah,
Vermont.
the one I went to with Neil. Yeah.
Exactly when Neil Peart came out. But I would always try and get, like I said, this has got to be the top people on the planet need to be here, and people studying with them and working with them. And for years, I would try to get him, and he was always busy. And at one point, I was in Havana, for our Cosa Cuba workshop, and I was at the hotel. Somebody said, who's here is Ry Cooder. They're recording the second
Oh,
album or something. So
oh,
I said,
that's a
well,
great record. I know that record that they didn't. Oh man, that's a
yeah.
fantastic record.
And so I said, so Jim Keltner's around. So I called Jim's room. So I said, so what do you think? And he says, man, you're going to find me everywhere, anywhere. I said, whatever needs to be done, I'm going to do it. So he said, so we stayed on the phone. I mean, I didn't go to his room or anything. I think he was doing something that he couldn't get, anyway. So we had this really long conversation, and I'm thinking to myself, this is the guy who's been behind working with the Stones, with like everybody you can
Yeah,
imagine in the back. He's like that envelope around
yeah.
everything, and
Uh, Unbelievable. Yeah, unbelievable career and contribution to music.
from the beginning,
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah,
Everything we
yeah.
listened to, he's one of those threads. It was in and out, and then even in the Cuban music, that whole recording, all of the material and work that Ry Cooder did over there,
He
amazing.
Jim is one guy that's a student of music and the instrument. And um he always, like at the NAM show, I'd see him carrying like always these odd, like, what is that, Jim? It was like a tube, or it was like a bamboo chute with a gourd on the bottom. He would love to find these instruments that he would, I guess, integrate into sessions. His collection, like his storage locker, must be unbelievable, of with unique percussion sounding instruments or things that create percussive sounds. Yeah, his and I've been trying to get him to do a book for years. He just won't talk about himself. It's like he's not interested in it. And I said, Jim, I'd
Yeah.
say it's got to be documented. We really need to do a book on what you've created.
Sure.
Unbelievable with the Beatles. I mean, it goes back to crazy things that he's been seen and played on and been involved with. Just amazing history there. But anyway, um going back, so just going back, so I'd said the collective kind of became the base, and really what you're saying, guys would come in and do a master class for 15 or 20 people, and it'd be like, wow, this is in the early 80s, Lenny White or John Schofield, and different people
Yes.
would come in, and I'd say to myself, you know, it's a shame we can't capture this somehow, because, the 15 people that are seeing it that for that one time in New York, well, what about the thousands of people, in St. Louis and Detroit and Hong Kong and London and, Rome? They'd want to
Sure.
see this thing too. And one day I was, hanging out with a friend of mine, this guitar player, and he said, I've got this friend, he's a cameraman for NBC, big TV network in New York. And he's telling me that there's this thing that's coming. Everyone's going to have a box in their living room, and it's going to connect to your TV, and you're going to be able to play a videotape, and there's going to be movies. And I said, wow, this is amazing. I knew nothing about video or cameras or lighting or anything. And I started to look into that a little bit. And I said, wow, we can record some of these master classes. And that's really how that whole world for me and for Paul at the time, really got started. We knew nothing about it. We bought some lights, we taped them up to the ceiling, we burned the ceiling panels, we knew
Right.
nothing, and we had no budget. Everything I've done has been like, no budget, and we borrow and beg people. And I had friends that owned a studio, so I would go play on sessions for them, and they'd give me studio time. I mean, it was all barter and begging, But
Nice.
that was really how DC, the original company was DCI Music Video, which stands
Right.
for Drummers Collective. It grew out of the collective. And we put in, when we did our first couple of videos, we put like a little tiny classified ad in the back of Modern Drummer. Videos were $79.99, and we'd come in and there'd be a couple checks in the mailbox. And I said, wow, this is a great way to make some money. Money's coming in the mail. I'm home sleeping, and I come in and there's some money the next day. It's like I thought we hit, like, the Las Vegas jackpot.
Right, right. And also that idea of sharing and giving, concretizing what people are saying. I mean, those original videos that you guys had, I think I have every single one, and multiple copies. Of course, we used to buy them for the COSA camps and make sure everybody had them. But
No, thank you. And my kids, thank you for helping put them through college.
yeah, but it was such a great thing. I mean, Steve Gadd up close, you
Yeah,
know, what can I
yeah,
say? I
yeah.
mean,
I know
I
that was the game changer. When I stalked out Steve for a while, he's another one that he was so busy at the time,
yes.
literally working around the clock. He'd, record records at night, jingles in the morning. He'd go straight through, like, for days on end. It was unbelievable. And he's still a workaholic. He still won't say no to work. He's in
Oh
Japan
yes.
right now.
Right.
Um, at 78 years old, he's got, like,
78. Yes.
he's
Well,
touring like crazy, right now. But that's how the whole thing really started, and there were some landmark people that helped me on my journey. Steve was certainly one of them. That video put us on the map kind of internationally. And that became a calling card. Like, other people that we would want to do a project with, we'd say, oh, we did the GAD video. Oh, you did the GAD video? Okay, now you can call me and we'll talk.
of
It
course,
opened,
yes.
it literally opened doors, because Steve was so respected, and people saw it as a good thing. It was
Sure.
just a matter of documenting. It's really what a lot of your journey has been, which is to expose people and document people to the world. And what you do in Cuba is absolutely outstanding.
Thank you. Thank you.
The music, to me, there's two places, one I've been to and one I haven't been to. New Orleans and Cuba and Puerto Rico. I love the music that comes out of these places, and they're all related to me. They're all cousins. New Orleans is like it almost doesn't belong in the United States. It's kind of like its own little
Sure.
country when you go there. The food, the music, it's like another planet. But um, the Cuban stuff, I mean, we were on a mission for a while to get Changuito, as you know, who was like this
Yes.
legendary, percussionist with Los Manvan at the time. And, there was a big issue, getting Cubans into the country, as you know, and travel and blah, blah, blah. But we were able to somehow, and I have no idea how the cards lined up to make it happen, to get him in New York for a couple of days. And, we went in the studio with him, and then with a day with him and Giovanni. It was
Giovanni, right?
amazing, yeah, amazing stuff.
Yeah.
But
And yeah, no,
a great, a great document.
yeah, oh no, no, absolutely. And what's I mean, now we can look back, and I hope those things don't get lost. It's so important to document those. Just like, when we decided, I said, we have to have the Cuban part of this, so it has to be Changuito. So Yolan and I went to Havana, went up to his place, and the time he was living on the third or fourth floor somewhere, and get in a cab. I have his address. So I have to speak to him, because you can't, at the time it was very difficult to get anybody on the phone.
Right.
So, and Yolan was pregnant at the time. It was in August. It's like, 40 degrees Celsius, which is like over 100. So we climb up. No, no. First, we get in the cab, and I'm looking at the address. I give the taxi driver the address, and he says, "Yeah, okay." So he's going, and we're going through these streets. And I said to Yola, I turned around, and I said, "God, I wish Changuito would have been more specific." So the taxi driver looks at me and says, "Oh, you want to go to Changuito's house?" So then we're there.
How funny is that? Wow.
And that's the neat thing about Cuba. I mean,
Yeah.
they're so ingrained in the culture. Everybody knows everybody. Superstars begin. I mean, it doesn't matter. Everybody knows, and everybody is part of it, has lived it, respects everything, understands what You have people singing the songs of rumba, the traditional stuff, and then going into a dance club, and listening to funk from here. Anybody else, and they're just totally on it, totally there, and they know
Yeah.
who everybody is,
Yeah.
and
It's
and
very cool.
it's not like you have to explain yourself when you say I'm a musician.
Yeah.
Or, you know,
It's amazing what you just said. The first time I went to New Orleans, exactly the same thing. I got out of the airport, got in a cab. The cab driver was a friendly guy. We started talking. And I said, do you know about any good music happening tonight? He was like, oh, he was like, at this place you can go here, and here's who's playing there. And it was incredible, and it really made, like you just said, a really strong impression on how in that town, it's like in Cuba, ingrained. It's
sure.
like people respect music and know what's happening, and it's a very cool thing. And it's not always the case when you travel, anywhere in the world, the United States, anywhere. It's almost, sometimes you got to really dig to find good music,
Oh yeah,
unfortunately, you
yeah,
know.
yeah. No, at one point, Havana and New Orleans were like sister cities. That's why you hear a lot of clave in New Orleans, because there was after the revolution of the Haitian Revolution, there was a huge influx of people from Havana to New Orleans, and there's a big connect there for a very long time. You know, but getting back to people like Changuito and all of those people in Cuba who have created so much music and have never stopped creating, unbelievable. And these are all people who are on our faculty, right?
Yeah.
And they're all
Yep.
willing and there. even during COVID, we did a 2 day live from Havana with Piloto, Changuito. Horacio was there because he's living in Havana. We had Oliver Valdez. I think there were like 9 people, a 2 day intensive live from Havana on Zoom. And I hosted it from right here. And it worked. It was amazing. But all those guys, I said, we're not working, we're not going anywhere, and neither are they, which is for Cuba, that was insane.
Yeah.
That
Well,
was,
it's great. It's great that you took a lemon and made lemonade. In other words, with COVID, we were all, kind of locked down. You weren't going to go to Cuba. And I'm sorry, it's this. I'm supposed to meet Bernard Purdy in a couple of hours. He's texting me as to where we're meeting. Um, the um, the thing with COVID, everybody figured out ways of creating, and we put out a
yes.
book working with Gad. It was the first project I'd done with him in many, many years. It was because he was home with COVID lockdown, and he was doing all he was starting he wanted to keep his chops in shape, so he was doing all this stuff with rubber tip sticks on tabletops, like his wife was telling me in the middle of the night. She's hearing him tapping in the kitchen. And
Yeah.
one day he called and said, I'm working on these rudimental things. They're just fun for me. And we did a FaceTime. I said, let me see what you're talking about. And it was these really beautiful like exercises, and his hands looked amazing. And I said,
Yes.
Steve, I think if you got enough of this could be a book. I mean, it's really great stuff, and I can see your hands are in great shape. It's the proof is in the pudding, kind of.
Right.
And so I said, yeah, let's make it a book, and we kind of got into it. And he's so focused when he gets into something. We spent like probably close to a year on it. And he'd call up and say, oh, go to page 38, the last eighth note in bar 7. I want an accent on that note. It makes the whole thing groove better. And that's how it was working with him. And then that book came out, and people, it was, good timing. I mean, unfortunately, I'm not happy about COVID, but I was happy that it gave Steve a chance to work on something like that and give it to the world.
Yeah.
Um, through Hudson, because it was, people loved, really loved the book, and it was great because people were still locked down when it came out, and it even after the lockdown, people had that inspiration to work on some of
Right.
this stuff. So it was cool, you
Gave
know.
everybody something to do. It's a great book. I mean, all the stuff you guys did. But I remember just going back a little bit, the DCI, and then you sold that whole video thing to Warner Brothers
Yeah, we
or
well, we
out.
sold it actually at first to Columbia. CPP Bellin was the name, Columbia Pictures Publications. It was,
Okay.
and we had become friendly with Sandy Feldstein. He was the president of CPP. He had come from Alfred. He became president of CPP, and he said one day, would you be interested in selling, the company, and I'll provide you the capital to produce a lot of content. And we said, yeah. He said, we had owed a lot of money at that point. Again, it was all done on a shoestring. We had amazing vendors like printers and video duplicators that extended us amazing amounts of credit, way more than we were worthy of. But they believed in what Paul and I were doing at the time, and we paid bills, kind of when we had to. They call up and they know if it was like push come to shove, it's like, this is like 90 days, it's like you're past due,
Yes.
and you send us a check. It was amazing. Some of these people, I don't think this would happen nowadays in the corporate culture, but I had a feeling that Columbia Pictures was something was going to happen with them. And very shortly after we sold, they were purchased by Warner Brothers Publications, the
Wow.
the kind of the publishing division of Warner Brothers. And Paul and I had employment contracts. So suddenly we now had ID cards, which I still have somewhere, my Warner Brothers ID, because we had an employment contract that Warner Brothers had to either honor or pay us off. So Sandy went and became the president of this division of Warner's, which now included the whole CPP Bellwin catalog. And it was great. It was kind of a real heyday of video. Sandy had access to, obviously, with Warner Brothers there, a big budget. He let Paul and I produce like crazy, and never questioned anything that we wanted to make. It was like we'd fax him down. He was in Miami. Their headquarters were in North Miami. We'd fax at the time, like a form, like who's it with, why we doing it, what's it going to cover, and a budget. It was like a 1-page, 5 questions. And then as soon as he signed off on it, we knew we had the money allocated, and we pulled the trigger, and we would start producing. And Sandy said, I want you guys to produce like crazy. And we did.
Nice. Yeah.
We went, that's when we did, all kinds of projects, many, many, many videos
Yeah.
at the time.
And
And
Sandy, and
yeah,
Sandy,
so we were
no,
working
it's
we were working for Warner's, and we had an employment contract for 5 years. So
nice.
um
And
it
Sandy, I mean, getting back to at Sandy, I mean, he should get a lot of credit because he was such a gentleman. Who's a brilliant man, and somebody. I mean, I knew him for years, just in crossing paths in our in our community all the time. And you remember when we did that project, the COSA project with Hudson, the video,
yeah,
the studying with the masters. And I said, this is a perfect situation. We have everyone here. At one point, we had even like 29 artists on site. It was like university intense for 1 week. And then I
yeah.
said, well, it would be a shame not to film these. So you guys agreed, and so we filmed it. And I said, let's get Sandy in so that he can oversee, because this is a big project, studying with the masters. And I had designed it. They're doing 15-minute lessons, and then in the performances at night, that would reflect what they did in one of the classes. So it was a great idea. And Sandy was like, he was amazing. And you remember when after we released that, well, just when we were releasing, right in the middle of the project, Sandy passed. And, that's always, you say, wow, that's not fair. People so brilliant, so helpful in the community. And then we
Yeah.
lose them much too young. But he was great. But
Yeah, a real mentor for me, personally. And he was an amazing boss. I've had very few bosses in my life. I worked at Sam Ash, when I get out of college. So I had a boss for Sam Ash, and then that lasted, not even 2 years probably. All of a sudden I had Drummers Collective, and Paul and I owned it. So I had my own business at that point at age 25. I mean, we didn't make any money for years. Both of our wives had very good jobs, so they had careers, and they supported us, and believed in what we were doing. So we were very fortunate, because we really didn't make money for a long time, and then we started making like $50 or $100 a week, and it was like, wow, this is. I'm actually making money on my business. I'm taking home $50 this week. We
yes,
paid everybody else first, and it was fine. That's the way it should be. But yeah, Sandy was special. And I just, unfortunately, along those lines, want to mention Dom Famularo. Dominic had passed recently,
yeah,
and he was obviously another very, very important person in our community and in the drum world, internationally. And he built up an amazing reputation, and kind of the things he did, really. I mean, I was at his 70th birthday party, which was I think about 6 weeks before he passed. And people flew in from all over the world. There were hundreds of people. It was an amazing thing, really incredible. And the outpouring on Facebook I've never seen anything
yeah,
like it. But anyway, I just wanted to
yeah.
mention
No, no.
Dom.
Yeah, and Dom, I'd known him for over 30 years, and he was a permanent faculty on Koza in the Koza
Mm,
campus, you know,
hmm.
and even in China we worked together. So he was, yeah, I mean, he was everywhere. I think there were
Yeah.
5 Doms actually. I'm just, I'm just kidding. But I mean, I think it's important for all of us to when we are in a position to be helpful and useful, that's a part of what we have to do in our journey. You know, it's not
Yeah.
just about us. We've been given this opportunity, and now let's share. Let's make the world a better place, whatever it takes, in a small way, in a big way. It doesn't matter. Just our presence, by
Yeah.
the fact that we do something great, whatever it is, you know, like what you're doing, any of us has to be in that direction. You know, now more than ever.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's, I think, why we're all in music, because it's a universal, it's trite maybe, and you've heard it a million times, but it is a universal language. When I travel, if I'm in Europe and I can, somebody might recognize me, or if I'm wearing back in the day, had a drummers collective jacket. We were going up the Eiffel Tower, and a friend,
Right.
this young man was pointing at my jacket and tugging on it, and drummers collective, it's none of this has been about me. For my I don't know how, or again, I don't know why picked up drumsticks when I was 10. I don't know why I've fallen into this mission of documenting great drummers and drum education. That's sort of been my calling. And I don't know why. I don't really think about it. I kind of, and I don't really look back, and I don't enjoy talking really about myself. This was, I've been asked to do some of these podcasts before, and I turned down a bunch of them. But knowing you for this long, and the concept behind it, I thought, is very, very cool what you're doing, Aldo. So
Thank
I
you.
I,
Thank
I
you.
wanted to, I wanted to do this, and tell my tale a little bit, and hopefully inspire maybe somebody else to say that they can do something too. There was no path
Exactly.
for what I did. There was no book, there was no course, there was no college, there was
That's
no
right.
school, there was no teacher. Really, I followed, and I really do mean this. I feel blessed that I was able to follow a path of like something I enjoyed, every, I mean, look, nothing is perfect, and business gets hard, and you have pressure, and you don't sleep at night. And can I make payroll? Back in the day, we had quite a few employees. I'm not saying it's all fun and games, but I've, largely, and I'm still doing it because I still enjoy it, and I feel really blessed with that. At our age, you too, you're still there, sitting in that seat, because you enjoy it. You're not making money for doing this and spending this hour with me and giving me a chance to tell my tale. We enjoy it. We're on a mission, and I really do hope that people that see this, can see that, yeah, figure out a way to do something to help the world, to help the music business, to help music, to help drummers.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
that's really what it's about. And if I always have said, if you really believe in it deeply, whatever your mission is, if you in your heart like really believe it, and you wake up every morning and you say to yourself, failure is not an option. It's just, when you have people working for you, it's not an option. You've got families that you're helping support besides your own. I was always worried more about the
Of
people that work
course.
for me and their families. I've got this web of responsibility, and that's really what drove me a lot of the time. It was just not an option. You got to pay your bills, you got to pay the people that work for you, and there's a whole network that kind of springs out of that, and that's what sometimes would keep me up at night, but would also inspire me to say, yeah, we've got to fight through this, or figure out a way around a big obstacle, because failure is not an option. And I do think that when you really feel that in your bones, that you'll be successful. you
Yeah.
know?
No, no, you're absolutely right. And I think it dawns on you at some point that, every one of us, and then somebody said that to me, there's room for every single person on this planet. And then they said, think about it. Everybody will be so different. You are a mix of your culture, your studies, your mindset, your everything that you've done, and it's going to be so unique. There's no way anybody can replicate you. So, there was a Buddy Rich, there's a Neil Peart, like, and every single personality, even if they're not that well known, doesn't matter because everybody is so unique that you can always bring something to the table. And there's room. I mean, the table is not just an eight-seater. It's like
Right.
whatever,
At least
whatever.
10.
No, seriously. And my father used to say this: the table is room for everybody on the planet. So, if one realizes that, and then you just work and improve the things that you believe in and enjoy, you become really good at it. And then the rest is just being honest, straight ahead, and come. If you make an error, well, I mean, mistakes are just opportunities to learn anyway. So any decision you make is not an error. Is what pulled you in this direction or that direction. So you just make the best of it.
Yeah.
And then there's always somebody coming your way that will inspire you, like this conversation. They hear, how did he do that? Well, it didn't come from a book. It didn't come from it came from the mindset that you're in a position, and all of a sudden, it's funny how the phone call comes from above, and and you do the work and you show up.
You got to get from point A to point B all the time. And, there are definitely for me, landmark things that happened or people I met, or like we've mentioned some, but, you just keep going forward. And like I said, really believing in your heart. And the other part, the big a big piece of the milkshake is, besides the ice cream, is the hard work. All of the guys that I've worked with, every one of them, whether it's Gad or Garibaldi or Chick Corea or Neil, an incredible as example, the work that goes into what they do. Dave Weckl, the hours and hours of practice and
Yep.
thinking about what they're doing. Steve Smith. I mean, these are
Yes.
guys that I remember years ago, many years ago, I called Steve one day. I knew he was on the road. He had gotten home from a journey tour, and I called the next morning. I had one question I had to ask him, and his wife said he's downstairs practicing. I said, "What?" He's been out for like 6 weeks, whatever it was. He hasn't been home. He hasn't opened his mail, and he's downstairs practicing already. That's the commitment, musically, but I think, business wise, you've got to take care of business. And I don't know anyone that has lasted and had, the longevity without the hard work,
Of course.
and I think that if someone's looking for an easy way, like, oh, well, I don't want to go to school to be an attorney or whatever, a doctor, or an architect, a paint. It's not an easy way to, oh, I'll sit and play drums and the money's going to roll in, as we know. So, it's got to be, it's a combination of really learning a great work ethic, and I'm reminded of it constantly with seeing the guys that I get to work with. It's an amazing thing. Like Gad, he's in Japan for 3 weeks at age 78. He's coming home. His wife texted me, I need to talk to him because of some things with the new book. And she said, well, he gets home Saturday. Tuesday, we go to LA because he's got to rehearse. Then he's doing the Steve Gadd Band for 4 nights in LA. And then from there, they go to Europe for 2 or 3 weeks. It's like, oh my God.
Yes. Oh,
I,
no,
I
no.
can barely get myself to the gym, around the corner.
No, no, and that energy feeds on itself because you also see that you still can at a certain age, but you're developing all the time. And the Gad who we listened to today was not the Gad that we knew 20 years ago. So
Right.
it's a constant evolution.
Absolutely.
And we had, we had Gad here when we do the Coast of Montreal. We would have like only 25 people, and we had Gad in this very room here, with Antonio Sanchez, a number of people. So an intensive work with the person right in front of you, and you can't look away because he's like staring you down. And it's
Yeah.
a great way to work. And he would
Yeah.
come in and just be like one of us. Like, and that's what it is, because on both sides we know that, I mean, being fortunate still to be able to do what we do and able to share it and people appreciate it and make a difference. And you know that. And I know people like Steve know that they make a difference. Plus, it helps them grow. I mean, all of us, and you feel like you're still part of this big universe of what has been created, and you're still adding to it. And I mean, and also you're making a living and traveling the world or doing what you like to do, and be part of something bigger than what you are. I
Yeah.
think I think this is really really important. And I
We're
mean, what?
blessed, and we're blessed that we're able to do it. I
Oh yeah,
don't ever take for granted any of the projects I've gotten to work on, people I've gotten to meet, the people who've crossed my path. I always tell my kids, you never know whose path you're going to cross, when you wake up that day. So, be cool with everybody, and it all works out
absolutely.
in the end.
Absolutely. And also keeping your options open, keeping your imagination open. For example, here's a good one. I was just thinking, you went from the DVDs, the VHSs, and all of that to the books to and then beyond that, and then the COVID, and then the shutdown, and then all of a sudden you came up with this idea of the guru. You came up with the idea of online books, digital books, you know and that's successful. So that because technology now has developed and there's this huge shift, you're still there with that idea and leading the pack.
Well,
It's
thanks.
nice.
Thank you. I try to run. I keep an eye over my shoulder. I don't want them to catch up to me. I'm like, as long as I'm half a step ahead of the pack, no, it's good. Yeah, it's either you move along with the wave or you sink. You know what I mean? So we try to keep floating.
Yeah, that's good.
I,
And
I live near the ocean here, so I use that analogy, but it's true. You have to keep your eyes open to what's going on around. And, we were very fortunate before COVID hit. I had made a commitment to digital, both video and in print. And, we really worked hard at it with the belief that one day this is going to be a good thing. And when COVID hit, it kind of changed the landscape because people were home all over the world. They could get our products instantly without anything, without leaving their house, without going to their mailbox. And so it really, kind of planted that flag for us. And now we're selling more digitally than we are physically.
sure,
It's
sure.
amazing. It's
Yeah, no, no,
really
no.
like it used to be like this, and now it's gone like that. It's really been amazing. So anyway.
Yeah, and that's something that's. I mean, for example, my book, "The Cuban Rhythms for Percussion and Drum Set." I mean, some places on the planet can't get that book physically. It's becoming a challenge. So
Yeah.
Hudson,
Yep. Hudson Music. There it is. It's it's
yes,
it's I see it right behind you there. It's a great book. A really great book.
and
You should be proud of that work, Aldo.
oh, it took me 3 years to do it. And as we were doing the Costa Cuba workshops, there were always these questions that came up. And, I'd be facilitating because they're obviously in the classroom with Changuito, with Piloto, and Amedito Valdez, and all of these people. And some questions that were being asked, those guys who actually invented those rhythms wouldn't be able to answer. And then I thought, so I'd be explaining and I'd be navigating. And then I thought, part of the problem is not the right question. And the other part of the problem is the way the question is posed is not how do you answer a question that you don't really understand where it's coming from. So there's a disconnect, and people would be writing books and making assumptions. So then I thought, okay, I'm going to really pay attention and write down everything, and then I sat down with Changuito. Sat down with everybody. I charted. I wrote down. I did. I said, and I'm not going to have like tracks that are only 4 bars long, just examples. I want to have real play-alongs that they play, and so that people can play along with, but real, not just that we do that we think that's what they do, and most people do really good job. But I wanted to do something so authentic or not, or nothing. So I went through the whole thing with them and I asked them, please look at all of this. Is this correct? And I drove everybody crazy. I mean, of course, they're happy I did it because people like Changuito said, finally, somebody who gets it, understands it, and is taking the time. And I said, not everybody has the opportunity to do what I'm doing and come here and spend so much time in Cuba. And I'm part of the the culture almost. And the Ministry of Culture now accepted the book as an official book in the system, in the music schools in Cuba. So I'm really happy about that.
I was going to say, it's great that you do the work that you do. It's to be respected and applauded. But people don't realize the amount of effort that goes into these projects. Like you said, you spent 3 years. The GAD, Gadaman's book, was a year. Steve, it was like constant. Because he was home. We just released the new a kind of a combination book with Steve called A Life in Time. It's a
Yes.
hardcover, like coffee table book. It comes with a transcription, a second book that's transcriptions. This, we Steve it's part biography. He talked about his life starting at age 2 and playing drums. And it's an amazing. I'm very proud of it. It's just starting to ship and get out there now, and people are, the feedback has been tremendous. But it was another project we worked on for like a year. We do these Zoom calls, and we wanted his analysis of songs and how he came up with the parts and why he came up with the parts. And so we would play. It was amazing to watch him. We would play a track, it's a Chick Corea tune from Mad Hatter, and he'd say, "Oh, I haven't heard that probably in 20 years." So we'd play it on Zoom, and we'd watch him like he'd be grooving with the music, and then he would smile, and then we would ask questions like, his memory is really sharp, so we would talk about recording and where it was done and how many takes. Sometimes he would talk about, did they practice, did they not practice before the recording, and it was fascinating. Anyway, so that book was a year, also, at least I'd say a year in the making. And then we were able to, because it was Steve. James Taylor wrote the introduction. It was, it was great. Anyway, my point being, people don't realize that. They don't think about the work. It's just like when you see a house, you take it for granted. But if you build a house, you learn an awful lot about, what goes
Yes.
into a house.
Yes.
And it's something that we take for granted. But anyway, I think we could go on and on. I don't want to keep you. And I'm getting calls from from Purdy to go meet him.
Okay. Well, please say hello to Bernard
I
for
will.
me. And this conversation. Of course, there's so much more that you've done and the path that you've been taking that we should really plan a second episode.
Oh boy. Well, maybe in 10 years. I need some time to get to some new stuff.
Okay, but I want to thank you
God
though.
willing.
Rob, I mean, what you've helped us, like, the whole community, and I enjoy your friendship, of course, and sometimes ideas, like, all that we've done, just for you to know, during COVID, everything that was done at COSA, including Neil Peart and, everybody who's been there, we film everything. And repercussion, everything that we've done over the years. And I just record and document everything. So during COVID, of course, we digitized everything. So now we just finished that. There were like
Mm.
2,000 tapes. Now I have to, we
Oh
just had
my
to,
God.
yes, figure out like
Wow.
what, this is all documented. Now it's there. And eventually I'll, figure out the best way to get it out there so that it can be shared and seen, and it's not sitting in a drawer like a lot of stuff does.
That's great. Well, if we can help along the way, let me know.
I'll throw some ideas your way at some point. You have great imagination, so it'll be a pleasure.
Yeah, if I can help, I'd be happy to.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I want to really thank you for taking the time. I know like you're busy and you don't look busy, but I know you're busy. But thanks for taking the time.
My pleasure, Aldo. It's good to catch up and see you, number one. It's been a while. So hopefully, we'll cross paths again soon. And I wish you the best, and keep your the gas pedal down. Keep doing what you're doing, because it's important stuff, man.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob.
All
And
right.
as I always say, to be continued.
To be continued.
Yes.